Hi, folks. Welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. Wanted to talk to you a little bit this morning about history, about our history. And the reason is, well, a couple of reasons, because this thing that I'm going to talk about happened this day in history. And I believe that it's vitally important for us as a people to remember our history because, as many people have said, history repeats itself. There's nothing new under the sun. And if we don't know our history, we cannot have a good idea of where we're headed in the future. It is always good to have that kind of connection to what we have done in the past and what our ancestors have gone through. Also, I want to revisit this bit of history because the weather recently has been something that should remind us of what it would be like. And what I'm referring to is on this day in history, 246 years ago, was the day that Washington and his army crossed the Delaware. Over the last few days, many of you have experienced some pretty cold weather. According to the news, about 2/3 of the country has been under some pretty harsh temperatures, and it's that same today. Although it is warming up, you can see the creek there has a little bit of thawing going on. We're supposed to hit, I think, about 28 today, which is going to feel very balmy. Considering the last couple of days, we've only hit into the single digits, even the low single digits for high. So I wanted to revisit this because I think we can learn so much from our history. 246 years ago today, Washington and his army had not been doing very well in the war against Britain for the independence of this nation. They had no major victories, and everything just seemed to be going against them. And if you have to realize, if you're not that well aware of your history, that Washington's army was pretty much just a ragtag group of guys. It was made up of militia, farmers, a few professional military people, but very ill-equipped. Many of these men didn't even have boots or shoes to wear. They had no proper uniforms to speak of, virtually. Their equipment was very poor. They were malnourished. They were cold. They were, by every sense, just not equipped at all to fight a battle. And the other hand is that the British Army was the most powerful standing army on the face of the earth at that time. They had been victorious in various regions across the world. These guys were battle-hardened troops. They had the very best equipment, the very best training known to man at that time. And this was the force that Washington had been fighting and had been not doing so well. On this day, 246 years ago, Washington decided that he would take advantage of the cold and the fact that most troops would be kind of relaxing because it was Christmas Day, and do a surprise attack on a garrison in Trenton, New Jersey, that was being run by some Hessian troops. This shouldn't have even happened. There shouldn't have been any victory. If you read the accounts of history of how nothing went right in this preparing for this attack. Again, his troops hadn't been able to sleep very well. I mean, think about it. For those of you that's been enduring the cold for the last few days, can you imagine being out in this cold weather, not having any shoes or very little footwear, having very few clothes? I mean, they didn't even have really winter gear. They were just wrapping themselves in blankets. How well could you sleep at night? Probably not very well. Having very, very little food to keep you going, little sleep, and yet they were crossing a river during a nor'easter storm. Where they were being pelted with sleet and snow and cold winds, and marching several miles in the night under those conditions. They could barely even see in front of them because of the wind and the snow that was blowing. And yet, against all odds, Washington led his 2,400 troops to a victory over the garrison there at Trenton, New Jersey. And it was the first major victory in the war, and that really kind of started to turn the tides of the war. A lot of the colonists started to see the potential for victory and started joining, and which, of course, as we know, led later on to the complete victory of independence from Great Britain. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because We in today's world, sometimes we're a little soft, okay? And I know many of you are going to say, not me, I'm hard. And maybe you are. I'm not pointing you out individually. I'm saying we as a people tend to be much softer than they would have been 250 years ago. The cold weather, well, we just don't want to do what we need to do because it's just too cold, or the conditions aren't right, or I don't have the best gear. I'm not all super tactical. I don't have my $5,000 rifle, so I'm just not good. We focus on things that in the end really aren't that important. The battles that we're facing now and that we'll face in the future, they may not be quite the same kind of battles that Washington and his army faced, but they are still battles nonetheless, and they still require strength that many of us aren't sure that we have. They require resilience that so few people seem to have nowadays. And as many of you, not all, but many of you are taking the day off to be with family, you need to remember that the battles that we face again may in fact be somewhat similar to what Washington and his army faced 246 years ago this day, where they had to face pretty much all odds were against them. It was miserable. I can only imagine how those troops had to feel of having hardly any sleep and no food, no winter clothing. Very, very few soldiers had footwear, no proper equipment whatsoever, and that they had to walk 10 miles or more in weather kind of like this, but even worse because it was snowing and sleeting and raining. Going across a river, walking in the dark at night to go face a force that was much more powerful than them, much more trained, a defensive force behind a garrison, a force that had the proper equipment to do battle. And yet, even against all those odds, Washington's troops were able to prevail. Folks, we may face a physical kinetic battle, much like Washington faced. And even if we don't face that kind of battle, we face other battles that seem impossible for us to win, impossible for us to succeed in this battle for righteousness, this battle for our individuality and our independence and our liberty that once again we are faced today with all the things that are happening in this world. And let us not forget that there were others that have gone on before us that have faced many of these same battles under some even worse circumstances, and they were able to prevail. So if we can just reach deep within ourselves and find that strength and that courage and that resiliency, we too can face these same kind of battles, and we too can win. There is so much that we will most likely face in the coming year and the years to follow. Things that we probably would never have dreamed we would face, and our forefathers probably would never have dreamed that we would face. But nonetheless, we're most likely going to face them. And I'm here to tell you that it's probably not going to be easy at times. It's going to be many times probably like that night that Washington and his army crossed the Delaware. And walked those many miles to face those battle-hardened, prepared troops. But I'm telling you, in the same way, we can prevail also. The battles before us may be tough. They may be leave us miserable and broken. But if we find the strength within us and use the same motto that Washington chose that night. There was a motto that's been echoed many times, but in other situations. But Washington chose it that night before pursuing in this battle against the Hessians there in Trenton, and that was victory or die. And although that may sound so harsh and dark in today's world, that is something that we should also consider. That there's no chance here that we're going to lose. There's no option for us to give up. There's no chance that we may lose this. We are going to win or we will perish. And if we continue with that kind of motto and that kind of mentality, regardless of where you're at, regardless of your preps, regardless of your strength, your physical body, your togetherness with other like-minded people, or your aloneness all by yourself, fighting this battle and getting yourself prepared, having the mentality that we will survive and that we will prevail or else, maybe just the thing that we need to win against the evils of this world that are out there. And I'm afraid, folks, that it's going to get that way. There's so many things going on that any one of them could be a major blow to us. And there's several of them happening at once, whether it's wars or economic problems or food supply problems, or just the general trampling upon our rights and our individuality. Folks, it's time to get your houses in order. Again, some of you today are taking this day to celebrate, and others, kind of like myself and my family, we view today very differently, but that's okay. It's okay. It's not a big deal. The point is that you need to be changing your mindset, getting into that mindset, much like Washington and his troops did 246 years ago today, that regardless of what happens, no matter how much everything is against us, we will be victorious or we will perish trying. Folks, get your houses in order. Prepare mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.